I just wanted to offer a trigger warning that this presentation contains material related to mental health challenges, drug use and domestic violence. I'm aware that some of you may find it challenging to hear about these topics or may find them distressing. So please take care of your wellbeing. Feel free to step away and pause or seek support if it's needed. Thank you so much. So today I would like to speak around the alternatives to incarceration, stemming from a system that allows for medical and neurological evaluations during the process of being charged for a crime. Reconceptualising justice. So while my presentation includes research and as evidence, I'm presenting from the perspective of someone who has lived experience of the justice system, mental health challenges, and a history of trauma. I'm hoping to provide some further insight into how the current systems can be changed in order to help improve possibility of rehabilitation. So this is me in 2018. I, at the time, was in the midst of an ice addiction. I was involved in a domestic violence relationship, and I had received a whole heap of charges around fraud that I was interviewed for by police. I was taken into the federal police offices down at Darling Harbour. The room had fluorescent lights. There were 2 detectives interrogating me, and they just gave me a whole heap of information about the charges that I didn't understand. I was read my rights, but because I was in a nervous and a stressed state, I didn't comprehend what they were telling me. I don't remember what I was told. I didn't have a legal representative with me, and I don't remember being asked if I would like to have a lawyer present. I do remember being told that if I complied with them, I'd avoid further complications. And so I did so in an effort to make proceedings as smooth as possible. It made sense to me to do that. But none of what I was told on the date of my charging was to benefit me. And I learned later that many of the things that I had complied with due to fear and being unaware worked against me. I'd never been involved in the criminal justice system, and the process was moving around me with procedural efficiency, yet no one asked me a question that would have fundamentally altered the interpretation of my behaviour. What medical, neurological, or physical factors may have influenced your actions? This omission reflects a systemic pattern rather than an isolated oversight. So we all recognise that there's a structural gap in the contemporary justice system, and that criminal justice systems operate on the assumption that offending behaviour is primarily volitional. If you break the law, it's because you meant to, right? But neuroscience tells us something radically different. It tells us that trauma rewires the brain. It tells us that chronic stress reshapes decision-making. It tells us that neurological disorders impair impulse control, and medical conditions, from epilepsy to traumatic brain injury, they can mimic criminal behaviour. But despite this evidence, in Australia, we don't require medical or neurological evaluation at any point during charge. And as a result, critical information about an individual's cognitive functioning or their trauma history is absent from their early legal decision-making. I know this gap intimately because I lived with it. Prior to my charge, I was experiencing mental health complications compounded by chronic trauma and prolonged stress. So my cognitive functioning was compromised. Due to my personal circumstances, I lived in fear of repercussions if I was to articulate my situation. I didn't feel like I could go to a counsellor or a psychologist and say, this is what's happening in my life. I was scared to. So I'd found myself in a relationship where I was being controlled with drugs and violence. And in order to avoid the violence, I was committing crime in an effort to establish a harmonious environment. But I couldn't divulge this to anybody at the time of my being charged due to fear of repercussions from my perpetrator. So in September 2018, I was charged with my crime and I was given bail. What that meant was, because I wasn't sentenced until February 2019, that whole period between September 18 and February 19, I still had to live with my perpetrator. So 5 months I continued to support him while I was committing crime until my sentencing. And that was when I was sent to jail and I could finally get out of the situation. Imagine going to jail and actually feeling relieved. That's where I was. So I hid my charges from my perpetrator and my family because the legal aid lawyer that I had been assigned had told me that I would receive a community order. He was 100% certain that that was going to be the outcome, but that's not what happened. I went to jail. So during 2018 and February 2019, I was admitted to psych wards 3 times. The judge was aware of this and took it into consideration with my sentencing, but it was overlooked as insignificant. During this period, I was taking drugs to help me forget about the crimes I'd committed. But when the drugs wore off, I'd start stressing about the situation, so I'd take more. But the drugs also reduced my capacity to recognize how my behavior was affecting others. They made me forget about consequences. And it became a cycle of guilt followed by taking drugs to forget, then being scared, then sad, then paranoid about my situation. And it started all over again. So the process was affecting me mentally, physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So during the incidents that led to my charge, my behavior was shaped by dysregulated neural processes, specifically heightened emotional reactivity and impaired impulse control. There are well-documented outcomes of trauma-related neurobiological changes, Perry 2006. But none of this was assessed. None of it was even considered. The system processed my charge without evaluating the underlying factors that contributed to my behaviour. So how could this experience have been different for me? What can we do in the system to improve outcomes? I believe what's required is early clinical intervention. To address the gap that we see, I propose a structured model in when medical and neurological evaluations are integrated into the earliest stages of criminal proceedings. Step 1, which is the next slide, please, Sarah, would be mandatory clinical screening at the time of being charged. So within 48 hours of being charged, individuals would undergo a neurological assessment, a trauma-informed psychological evaluation, and a medical screening for conditions affecting cognition or behaviour. This aligns with evidence-based practices in forensic psychiatry conducted by Ogloff in 2002. Next, we would look at diversion pathways informed by clinical findings. So we know that diversion contextualises behaviour and promotes effective intervention. So if evaluations identify relevant medical or neurological factors, individuals can then be diverted. So we'd look at neurorehabilitation programs, so cognitive retraining, memory drills, attention building tasks. We could look at occupational therapy to help them rebuild daily living skills, and then physiotherapy to help improve motor coordination. Another place that we could look at would be trauma responsive interventions, therapeutic interventions. So teaching grounding techniques, sensory regulation, safety planning. Now, once we've stabilised the person, their therapy can then go on to gentle-paced processing, so looking at somatic experiencing or trauma-focused CBT. Yeah. We could look at medication-supported treatment, the combined approach of medication, psychiatric intervention, reducing symptoms enough for the client to re-engage in work, relationships, therapy. And then we could look at cognitive behavioural therapy, restructuring to reduce avoidance and increase confidence. Now, this is all stuff we know. This is all stuff that we kind of go, wouldn't it be nice? But it's not being done. and it would cost a hell of a lot less than what's actually going on at the moment. The last bit that we would look at in step 2 would be community-based restorative justice initiatives. So holding them accountable for their behaviour in a positive way, meeting with affected community members, acknowledging the harm that they've created, collaborate on a repair plan, look at restitution, community service, mentoring. We know that the process strengthens accountability, it reduces offending, it rebuilds community trust, and it helps a person who's been through the process to feel better about themselves in society. And that only benefits us, right? Step 3 would be accountability supported by treatment. Thank you. So individuals will remain responsible for their actions. However, they'll engage in rehabilitative processes that address underlying causes rather than symptoms. So the individual would complete accountability tasks. Sorry, I just need a sip of water. They complete accountability tasks such as regular check-ins with a case manager, behavioural progress reviews tied to treatment goals, written reflections on incidents where they've successfully used new skills, and restorative actions, looking at repairing harm or participating in mediated conversations. Now, they still need to be held accountable, though. This isn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. If they miss sessions or they fail to engage, consequences are applied, but the emphasis remains on supporting behavioural change rather than punishment. So the reason I feel like I can speak confidently, given I have evidence from my own rehabilitation, is when I eventually accessed comprehensive psychological care, which was years after I had been charged, the impact on my life was transformative. I wouldn't be sitting here today if I didn't get the clinical help that I needed. I employed psychologists, counsellors, life coaches, anybody that would offer me something that would rewire my brain. I was there for it. And I was able to exhibit various examples of improvement. So emotional regulation. I'd suffered from mental health complications for years as a teenager, from being a teenager. It wasn't until all of this happened that I kind of went, why is this happening? How did I get myself in this situation? So through clinical intervention, I reduced my emotional reactivity significantly. It was through trauma-informed therapy, that I learned to improve my regulation, through learning to navigate negative thought patterns, techniques that helped me question my self-doubt, stopping the negative self-talk, all the stuff that we're familiar with that kind of brings us down but we can't get out of. My executive functioning improved. Neurological therapy strengthened my pathways associated with decision-making, with impulse control. So learning to put healthy boundaries in place, which was something I had never known how to do prior. Not feeling guilty when I said no. Maintaining healthy relationships rather than holding on to toxic ones. And the last example I have is for trauma integration. So through trauma-informed therapy, it enabled me to process past experiences without allowing them to dictate my present behaviour. So halting thought patterns that would cause me to ruminate, retraining the way I saw myself and forgiving myself, learning to forgive myself, which was so difficult, but probably the most valuable thing that I was able to do. But none of these outcomes came about due to incarceration. They were brought about by clinical care. So it's been proven time and time again that the societal cost of neglecting neurological and medical factors is significant. We have a myriad of research projects that provide evidence stating this. And these are examples here: the elevated recidivism with Andrews and Bonta, overcrowded correctional facilities, untreated mental illnesses, increased community harms, significant financial expenditure on punitive rather than preventative measures. But the biggest significant cost surrounding all of this is human. It's not about what you see on paper. It's the lives of the people that are impacted, and not only the ones that are in prison, but their families, and especially their children if they're mothers or fathers. What if we were operating with a clinically informed justice system? How would it make a difference? Imagine a justice system where a young man with undiagnosed ADHD is diverted into treatment rather than incarceration. Or a woman experiencing a neurological episode receives medical intervention rather than a criminal charge. What if a trauma survivor's fight or flight response was recognised as a neurobiological reaction and not a moral failing? Wexler's research in 2016 provides a vision grounded. Sorry, I'm reading that note and I shouldn't be. Wexler's research in 2016 proposes a vision grounded in therapeutic jurisprudence and international models of clinical diversion. So the research has found that when individuals feel heard, respected, and treated fairly, they're more likely to comply with court orders and engage in treatment. It isn't difficult to employ clear communication, opportunities for people to speak, transparent decision-making, or dignified treatment from justice personnel. In short, it's treating everybody like a person. In community services, we're all taught and encouraged to treat individuals with dignity and respect in a trauma-informed way, allowing them to self-determine an outcome. But all of this goes out the window as soon as they become involved in the Australian justice system. So this is me, March 2026, at a book launch where I was asked to contribute to a book. It's called She Is Me. My journey through the justice system was shaped by the absence of clinical evaluation. I present here today not because the system recognised my needs, but because I accessed care independently. I was lucky enough to have the ability to do that. Many aren't. Justice should begin with understanding. Clinical evaluation should precede legal judgment, and every person charged with an offence in Australia or around the world should have access to medical and neurological assessments, as well as treatment for their ailments. And only then do I believe that we can build a justice system that is both effective and humane. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Juanita, for an incredible presentation. And I just want to pay my respect
so
for your courage and strength in sharing that and all that you've gone through to be here with us today. Amazing presentation. I'm sure there will be questions from folks, as well as lots of love heart and clap emojis. So please, anyone who would like to ask a question of Juanita or make a comment, please feel free to put your camera on if you're happy to. We'd love to see your faces.
Maddie, I'm wondering about who the early assessments would be delivered by. Psychologists being employed by governments in justice departments or independent. How do we ensure this support is culturally safe? This is something we have to encompass from everywhere. And coming from a lived experience perspective, it's just not done anywhere near enough, especially when it comes to culturally safe practices. Thanks, Neville. I believe that the voice of our Indigenous population needs to be heard first and foremost, because they have such an there's cultural, there are gaps in the cultural practices that we provide, and unless we use their strength and knowledge and wisdom, the system can't be seen as credible. It's very difficult to be able to provide the treatment that's required if you cannot communicate with people in a way that they find on their level, for want of a better word. But yeah, it would have to come from an organic place where we start from the beginning. unfortunately, yeah.
Thanks, Juanita. Look, one thing that struck me just listening to your presentation, you were talking about that recommendation for screening within 48 hours in police cells. And I mean, it, I kind of knew that that wasn't happening, but it still strikes me as kind of, it's remarkable that it isn't happening because, you know, there's just so much evidence about the need for screening and support and treatment. So it does seem like a remarkable thing to me that in our systems, we don't have the investment, the funding to provide that sort of screening. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on why is this? I mean, if it's there's plenty of money
Why?
around if you need it, but what are your thoughts on why we don't currently have that kind of investment in comprehensive screening?
I feel like a lot of the reason why justice doesn't get the funding it should is because, unfortunately, the government doesn't want to be seen as weak on the stance when it comes to the justice system. Um, the I keep getting distracted by the chats. I'm so sorry. The justice system doesn't. Yeah, they don't. The government doesn't want to be seen weak, and when it comes to dealing with justice, they see it as they need to be punished. We're still dealing with a colonial mindset when it comes to prison and justice and all the rest of it. I'm not standing here saying that what happened to me shouldn't have happened. Pardon me. Like I said, I'm very lucky that I was to get out of it the other side, knowing what I had to do to make the most of the situation that I had been in. A lot of the people that are in there don't have that ability, and it is because of mental health and trauma and all the things that can be fixed under the right conditions. I've been locked up in a cell with a woman who was going through withdrawal from heroin and literally messing herself, and from both ends, because that's what you go through. I've been in jail long term with a woman who was obviously autistic and had not been dealt with. Women who refuse to take medication for mental health reasons. We're talking about women who refuse to take their psychotics and give them to other people because they don't want to take them. There's no management when it comes to health. If women are able to self-medicate, there's something very wrong going on, especially in that environment. The care is not there. Absolutely.
Yeah, the care is not there. And I just see Megan Phillips sounds like saying something complimentary in the chat. No funding as treatment doesn't win votes. We need to build community
Yep.
capacity to understand that punishment doesn't work. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's
Well
exactly
said,
right.
Alex. Yeah.
But I wonder if the average Australian realised that their tax dollars are going towards keeping someone in jail at $150,000 a year,
Mm.
as opposed to helping them recover and become a productive member of society at maybe $50,000.
Mm.
Would that not equate to, hang on, let's give this a go?
Mm.
It just baffles me.
It's a lot of dollars. I noticed there's a question from Monica Cass in the chat as well. I'm wondering if you've come across any work that speaks to the impact of access to appropriate medical evaluations on non-criminal justice processes like protection and care, tenancy issues, or family court. And also, is there research or work being done from a gendered lens or other intersectional groups?
I have a really wonderful professor lecturer that I've worked with at the University of Western Australia. Her name is Hayley Passmore, who has taught me a lot about this stuff. She is absolutely wonderful, and I think the best person to contact if you wanted to look at research sort of stuff, because that's what Hayley does. She goes into youth prisons and talks to people one-on-one. Hilda Tubex, also at the University of Western Australia, she does quite a bit of that stuff as well. Sorry, I forgot the first part of that question.
Have you come across any work that speaks to the impact of access to appropriate medical evaluations on non-criminal justice processes like protection, care, tenancy issues, family court?
Unfortunately, no, that's not something that I've worked on, but
Mm,
I'm sure, like in this area, it would be easy to find people who would be able to help you out with that. Yeah,
no worries. Thank you.
absolutely.
Um, any other comments or questions for you? And I feel like when I could ask you questions all day long. Clement, please go.
Hi, Juanita. Nice meeting you, and very powerful presentation. And thank you very much for how candid it is that you share with us. One of the things that jumps out, particularly for me in your presentation, is when you talk about, and just for disclosure, I have mostly worked in the therapeutic courts kind of space,
Mm-hmm,
particularly in mental health courts and other places.
mm-hmm.
And when you said, and I'm particularly interested in your live experience, when you say, yes, and I absolutely agree, the overall approach has to be all about supporting the people to get through the program and want to get
Correct.
help. But what I have seen in the past is, courts generally quite struggle with the carrot and stick model. And sometimes, too many sticks, that becomes too much disencouragement, so to speak, for people not
Mm-hmm.
to want to get through the program, or even just elect to, no, I might as well just go back and jail, do my time. I'm wondering from your experience, other than what you said, which I really absolutely agree, that the overall emphasis should be on supporting the people to get through. But where do you think from your life experience is where the good balance is being drawn?
I think it's very difficult because you would know that people are released from prison with all the good intentions, saying, I'm not going to come back, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then parole puts them in a home with drug users. And what do you do? Are they going to live on the street? They're going to find themselves back in prison 2 days later. Um, it's got to come from a perspective that looks at the whole situation. So we're looking at housing as in accompaniment with mental health and psychiatry, if that's what's required, with medication and AOD. It's got to be something that is looking at it in its entirety, because right now people are leaving parole they're getting parole approved without homes, or they're given homes with no furniture, or they're getting told that, okay, we're going to put you in this home in this area, but parole is 30 kilometres away and you need to be there at 8 a.m. every day.
Mm,
You know, that the departments aren't working together. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And that's the biggest obstacle where you're coming from. That's the biggest obstacle we have. So getting everyone to work together and get on board. Yeah. I
right.
mean, if it was up to me, I'd like start from I would literally get rid of everyone and start from the ground up again.
Mm.
You know, it's it needs an overhaul. It really does. Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks very much. So yeah, the silo issues are
Mm,
compounding what's already a very challenging situation by the sounds of it.
yeah.
Um, any other comments or questions for Juanita? You've evidently dazzled everyone so much, Juanita, that they're replete. Josephine.
Yeah. I thank you for such a wonderful presentation and being so
You're
generous in
welcome.
sharing. It was very moving for me. I'm
Mm,
interested in the intersectionality with particularly women. I mean, this happens to men as well, but I'm interested
mm,
in the idea of acquired brain injury as a result of domestic
yeah.
violence and the impact that has on behaviour that is seen to be criminal. And also for men, I'm thinking that as we now in the thanks to our sporting people, our sporting heroes,
Hmm.
the CTE conversations coming up more and
Hmm.
more, and I'm
Hmm.
interested in your opinion of the impact of domestic violence, but from a physiological point of view of this acquired brain
Yeah.
injury and function, and how that would impact. And
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, from my personal perspective and knowing the conditions that I lived in, acquired brain injury is rife
mm,
in the justice system, and the women that are within the justice system. I can't speak for the men, but when you're living with a group of women who have experienced that extreme trauma and do have those injuries, it's kind of, where I came from, I never should have gone to jail, really. You know, I came from a good home. I went to a good school. I was not exposed to the situations or the environments that most people that go through the system have been exposed to. So it was an eye-opener for me. But I very quickly was able to look at it from the outside and go, okay, there's obviously something going on there. And you start to very easily pick out FASD or brain injury, or they will tell you, don't hit me, I've got a brain injury, you know. It becomes, that's probably the biggest thing, is that you almost walk around with a sign on them saying, don't hit me, I have a brain injury, kind of thing. And they do get protected. They are protected by the other women. So yes, as a physiological kind of thing, they're very much aware of what's going on. And the thing is, the staff know. All of the staff know that this is what's going on, but none of them take their psychological or emotional stuff into account.
Yeah.
You know?
Thank you.
It's just frustrating.
It's a tragedy, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks, Nita. Thanks, Josephine. Monica.
I just wanted to point out that and I'm just double checking on the committee's name, the House of Representatives Standing Committee on Health, Aged Care and Disability has an inquiry around the access to and affordability of medical specialists in Australia. And I think it's a really good opportunity for us to raise the issue of access to medical specialists as being a justice, an access to justice issue. And obviously, coming from Women's Legal Service, we're coming at it from the point of view of access to a range of justice, not necessarily in the criminal space, but for women in particular, they can be really disadvantaged in a whole range of legal matters and access to justice more broadly without access to that specialist medical care, particularly in the regions and where, you know, they have particular needs. So I just wanted to encourage you to think about potentially putting in a submission based on your experience.
Thank you.
I feel like you have a lot to add to that particular inquiry.
Absolutely. Who was the commission?
You're on mute, Monica.
Sorry. If you go to the Australian Government Parliament, and you look at current inquiries, it's a House of Representatives committee, and it's the Standing Committee on Health, Aged Care and Disability. And it's called Access to and Affordability of Medical Specialists in Australia. It's due in October or so you've got a smidge of time, which is a nice
amazing
for submissions.
Thank you.
And there may be a few people in this group, Monica, who might have an interest in putting a submission into that, I suspect.